I think a lot of you all might have seen those. There's a very famous photo of equality versus equity, right? There are three boxes and then people standing on it. The logic is actually not the box. The thing is to see that how is equity making the start line same for everybody. When we started hiring trans people, hiring is the most easy thing to do. Okay, you find somebody, they're good with the job, you give them the job. That's the most easy thing. Now, generally a trans person relocates from their place of residence for financial inclusion or for expression, for the freedom of expression.
Correct.
Now, when they come to metros, they are kind of facing the difficulty of when they're expressing themselves, they're not getting accommodation. They're getting socially excluded from multiple spaces. Now you just put a man or a cis woman, a cis man and a cis woman doing their work. They don't have to bother about all of these pieces.
They're none of those.
If say there are two people working on the PPT at the same time, this one is worried, oh, do I need to call my broker? Is that person going to remove me? How do you make the start line same for everybody so that they're effective at work? And that's what DEI's job is.
Hello, I'm Ashish Soni and welcome to the Queer Podcast Season 3. Today we're going to explore a really important subject that is much needed for all of us on the sexuality spectrum, the issue of employment as queer individuals. So you might have heard or seen the abbreviation DEI, which stands for Diversity, Equity and Inclusivity. So let's just jump into the episode and the subject, as it stands to impact all of us, particularly the younger members of our community who are either in their first jobs or heading into their professional lives. And with us today, we have the charming and accomplished Zoya, who identifies as, and I quote here, and I love this line, gender fluid, I am a they, them with a she, her vibe. Correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So Zoya is currently the lead of D&I and employer branding at Godrej Properties Limited. And is making waves in the world of advocacy. They have led initiatives at GPL where over 100 LGBTQ++ professionals are currently thriving. And they've also been very instrumental in establishing the Pride internship program, helping queer individuals transition into full-time employees but based on performance. So Zoya champions diversity, equity and inclusion. And it inspires others to embrace their identities with pride and authenticity. And they emphasize that while your queer identity is a beautiful part of you, it's your skills, your dedication, and the impact that define your place in the world. So big queer welcome, Zoya. Many thank yous for coming in to chat.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashish. Thanks for calling me. I'll just make one correction.
Yes.
Not 100 plus, but 160 plus as of yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 160 queer employees at Godrej.
Yes. Yeah. It's been so when I joined, I think it was 8 people. And I think in the last 2 years, we have only looked at increasing representation, and it's been a thriving space for the folks. While doing increasing representation, we realized that maybe our policies also needed to be upgraded. Some things were outdated. And it's when you listen to the queer folks only, then you realize that these things need to change. And I think it's a continuous process.
Right.
From 160, let's see, another 500.
Yeah, wow. Good luck for that. Okay, so firstly, to get a bit personal, because I think it's also important to learn about your own journey, your own personal journey. So please tell us a little bit about your history. Where are you from?
So I was born in a city called Ratnagiri. I have done my schooling in Pune. I have worked in Bombay. So mostly Maharashtra. I did travel the world and in India, considering the work. But I think my experiences have been shaped majorly by how do I put it? My schooling and my conditioning that has happened over a period of time. As a person, when I was growing up, I think I was always made to fit into a box, and that's the whole binary sense of the life, right? I did not conform to it, but I had to play along the lines of it, and that kind of gets a little annoying at times. And I think the journey of self-acknowledgement is a piece, and it really takes some time for you to come to the place where you believe that, okay, this is me, before you even socially start transitioning or you start having conversations around it.
Yeah.
I think for me that that key was, I think, in the year when I was in school, 2007, I'm talking about. And that's when I really realized that, okay, this is who I am. Much before that, but I think 2007 is when I think social media was not so much out, but we had those sci cyber cafes, and you started reading, and you started realizing that, hey, I am not the only one who feels this way. There are other
Yes.
folks also.
Of course.
And I think the whole thing about knowing that there are other folks there who also experience the same way. Otherwise, you don't see. While I was growing, and I'm sure Ashish, you and even our predecessors, they didn't see this culture, or they didn't see the openness about
Yeah.
who can be themselves. I think that's me. And over a period of time, I've been expressing myself the way that I want to,
Yeah.
and that's my identity history. Yeah.
So I've read online, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you identify as pansexual, gender fluid. You are obviously now femme presenting. But I guess there were obviously moments in your younger years, like you said, where you felt that you were forced to conform to gender binaries,
Yeah.
right? So I think you already addressed that. So how then did you start getting to live your authentic queer life? And also added to that, do you identify as transgender? Because I understand that there are differences now, and it's all about individual choices, that you could be gender fluid, but you need not be transgender.
So I think a lot of questions
Yeah.
at one go. I'll take them at one piece
Sure.
of thing. So I would say I currently identify as pansexual, yes. And I do mention myself as gender fluid. I think the line that you mentioned, that I'm a they them with a she her vibe,
Fab
is
line.
is because there are two things. So currently in the state that I'm not able to take certain decisions because of, say, family, society, and hence I haven't really decided to transition or express myself the way I would really like to. Also, I think I'm still a journey, and I might reach there, might not. Let's see where the journey takes me.
Fair.
But I think I would always be tilting towards my feminine expression, and currently I specify that I'm gender fluid because it becomes difficult for people to really, if they see me not femme expression and you will see me something else, it becomes difficult. And I think I've grown up always thinking the comfort of the other person in front of me. Unfortunately, that's how I am built. So I use they them also as a term, and I'm using this on the podcast. Only my partner and some folks know this about me. It is that for the greater good of society, people need to understand what is they them. So it's okay to use the term they them, because then otherwise, if they see me expressing myself as masculine as well, they will be like, oh, am I supposed to say she her now? Am I supposed to say? See, you have to understand, people are not inherently bad. They're just not used to it, or they're not aware of it.
Right,
And
ignorance.
ignorance is the piece of it, right? If the stage that I'm at, the position that I have, if I can use it with certain powers, maybe people misgender me, it's fine. They will at least learn, and that's the hope of it. So my partner calls me she her, and in those with those pronouns. But for the society, it's okay if they learn on
Right.
it.
Now, since you bring up the partner, now you
Yeah.
are making me ask you this question because I have read. So your partner is a cisgender female.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Break the rules.
Yes. So she's always actually dated cis women prior to this. I was her first. It's weird to say I would be her first trans experience. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but yeah, I think things just happened. We never planned it. I have known my partner for, I think, since 2016. We actually worked in the same. So she was the client servicing for the creative agency as a Spock for the brand that I was handling at that point of time.
Ooh, office romance.
Not literally not office romance. That's something I met her in 2016. That's it. It was very professional in nature. Cut to 2018. Okay, very brief though. Artwork law is what the structure was. But I think in 2018, I think I was at a Gacy post pride party. It was in Verbena club, and I think this party was like a crazy one. Okay, I entered the party, and I think it was like a bar in the center, and the dance
Yeah.
area around it. I enter and I see my cousin brother at the bar. Okay, and I'm like, hey, why is this person here? And I'm pretty freaked out, because I'm still not out, entirely. And like I kind of freaked out. I went down. I took a little breath, and my friend is saying, see, if your cousin is here, either they are an ally,
Yeah.
or either they're not. I said,
Yeah.
point is
Yeah,
there.
correct.
Then I went up. I said, let me stay away from this person. And I went the other side, and I see this curly head of hair, and I've seen this hair. I'm like, "Kidhar to dekha hua hai?" And then my partner, means my current partner, she turns. I'm like, "Oh shit!" What? I was just so scared. I was like, if I see my mom here next, she wouldn't be surprised, because every nook and corner I'm finding somebody. I think again, cut to like 9 months after that, I kind of ping her post a meeting, and I'm like, "Hey, can I ask you something personal? Do you attend gay parties?" She took some like long time to respond. Okay, and I'm like, "Did I ask the wrong question?" Then she said, "Yeah, how do you know?" I said, "I saw you," and that's how we literally started meeting over coffee. And then so from professional to friendship to love, it's a journey that I have seen with
How
her,
fab.
and now living in together.
So really, this is really breaking the binary, because you're they them with woohoo,
Yeah.
they them with she her vibe, you're femme presenting, and your partner is a cis female,
Yeah, cis woman, yeah.
queer identified, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the broad sense of queer.
I think it's, if you start putting people onto a box now, is the
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
You have to really look at it as a spectrum.
Yeah.
And people can be standing on this multiple spectrum. So you mentioned I'm pansexual and I'm gender fluid, right? They both are two different spectrums. One is to do on sexual orientation, one is to do with gender identity.
Correct.
And gender identity and gender expression also will change.
Yeah.
I might not express myself masculine or feminine all the time. I think it's just, if you get the understanding of these three terminologies, that is gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation, then you will not put people into boxes.
Yeah, and I think also, just we are so conditioned to think, or at least my generation, to think binary and to think in those things, that we still struggle. Like for us, it's like, okay, this ya to left me, ya right me, ya to positive, ya negative, ya to male, ya female. So it becomes quite challenging to think like, okay, you have to throw away the boxes, and you have to just take and respect every individual for their own choices.
But it's purely conditioning.
It is conditioning.
And you cannot blame the individual for conditioning.
Exactly.
And
for the day you're born, you're conditioned. Yeah, blue peno or gaadi dinky car do ladka hai, and it starts very early. Okay, so so importantly now, the professional journey, which is why we're here. How have you sort of scaled these heights to be where you are and who you are? Because it clearly could not have been an easy path in an Indian corporate kind of environment, right?
I'll tell you, it was actually easy for me. I'm very privileged in many ways. I think I'm actually not an HR professional. I started off as marketing. I've done retail, digital, and I gravitated into going towards the whole space of DI because it just felt more purposeful for me. And I believe in the Steve Jobs way of career. Okay, that career is never upwards. It is linear, non-linear. You are doing something here, you might learn something from here and apply it there. What I learned in marketing is what actually comes the most use in when I do DI work, is because communication is key. If you're not able to communicate things in the most dumbed down manner for people, they will not understand such complex pieces. And what I really picked up from that, whether it's visual communication, whether it's copy, all of these aspects of it, I think it's what's making me thrive right now.
Right.
Literally a Steve Jobs story. Like, you will look at the dots connecting after it has happened, not before. And I think what has worked for me is, one, when I joined the ecosystem of Godrej, I think that really gave me the push for a lot of things that I could run with. I was doing DI in my previous organization, actually set up the DI council there. There was a lot of work that we did in the space of women at the shop floor.
Right.
Because it was just any manufacturing, if you see, it's heavily testosterone.
Okay.
It's very difficult that you'll find women at the shop floor. So it has improved, obviously, but if you look at largely manufacturing, okay, in most of the things, you can pick up some lighthouses, obviously, and you'll be like, oh, Nestle has done this, or Godrej has done this, exception. But if you look at the MSMEs, you look at the other things, you will see manufacturing is majorly male. So that was the work that I did. I think that kind of got picked up, and somebody at Godrej saw it and they wanted to have an interview. I think the interview was more a discussion than an interview. So Megha Goyal, who is the CHRO, current CHRO, she told me what she wanted to do with GPL and Godrej Properties and what I wanted to do here. And it was purely an amalgamation of, okay, let's get stuff done. It was that kind of discussion. She told me two things which really have stayed with me. She told me that women have taken 200 years to be where we are currently. it is our responsibility to shorten that journey for the other cohorts. And the second thing she told me is that Nisa Godrej had told her, we have all the policies, but we don't have the people to use them. So anything that you see in the last 2 years is to bring in that agility and speed, that we are reducing that time period for the other cohorts and also bringing in representation into the workforce, at the same time increasing this. But I think that ecosystem is something that really, you may remove me from the ecosystem and I might not really function in that way.
Wow.
Though I will have the energy and the intent, but I think it's things
Without
surrounding
the,
it.
yeah. So to ask an important question, what's the importance of DEI and why is it so crucial, especially for the queer community?
Generally, DEI, I don't like to use the jargon of it, because
Yeah.
currently, if you see the backlash that is happening, I would tell you DEI is bad, in the West at least currently. If you look and break it down to diversity, equity, inclusion, these are three important words. If somebody says that they're not for DEI, means they have to say, I'm not for inclusion and not for inclusion of women, and they'll have to really give a logical understanding why they don't want to include somebody. You have to really put them in the spot to say that, and that's the negative aspect of it. That's a negative view to look at it, right? The positive view is, in an organizational space, historically, because of systemic barriers, there is certain amount of people who have not been able to enter that space. Okay, the door wasn't open for many of them. We can use the word glass ceilings, we can use anything, but the
Correct.
actual end, the point is that there's been a barrier to entry. Okay, DI, what it does is, it understands, okay, this is a cohort that is systemically excluded from these particular groups or from these particular spaces. What can be done to bring them into these spaces, and what can be done so that they can thrive in this space. Okay, so for example, I think a lot of you all might have seen those. There's a very famous photo of equality versus equity, right? There are three boxes and then people standing on it. The logic is actually not the box. The thing is to see that how is equity making the start line same for everybody. So say, for example, even if I get entry, so I'll give you an example. So when we started hiring trans people, hiring is the most easy thing to do. Okay, you find somebody, they're good with the job, you give them the job. That's the most easy thing. Now, generally a trans person relocates from their place of residence for financial inclusion or for expression, for the freedom of expression.
Correct.
Now, when they come to metros, they are kind of facing the difficulty of when they're expressing themselves, they're not getting accommodation, they're getting socially excluded from multiple spaces. Now you just put a man or a cis man and a cis woman doing their work. They don't have to bother about all of these
Correct.
spaces.
They're none of
getting the
those.
space. If say there are two people working on the PPT at the same time, this one is worried, oh, do I need to call my broker? Is that person going to remove me? How do you make the start line same for everybody so that they're effective at work? And that's what DI's job is. DI's job is not to create a quota or to bring in people saying that, okay, now these many amount of folks are going
Checkbox,
to be. Not
yeah.
at all. It is to see that how are we creating the workforce that mirrors the community that we serve. Okay, so if GPL now mirrors, it means if India is the market space that we work in, is India's population of men, women, trans, LGBTQ, persons with disabilities across religious minorities, is it representing here? Because let me put the business angle to it. GPL, that's Godrej Properties, or any business operates to create services and products for the larger society, right? You can go into niche segmentation of it, but the larger society. If your workforce doesn't have the people who they are going to sell to, it's not going to be possible. And literally for us, so for example, we had to hire persons with disabilities to understand what is universal design. And while we fix for persons with disabilities, we fix for people who are elder care, right? And that's the learning around it. I think, you can use jargons, people will tell you that DI is good for innovation and all. But how does that innovation actually flow in is where you need to kind of get this.
I think you really sum it up beautifully when you say that make the start line the same for everybody, no matter what the
Anything, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's nice. Yeah. So DI obviously helps address systemic barriers that queer employees face. And just to list some, I mean, you live that life, so you know better than me. But discrimination in hiring and promotions. Many queer people, individuals hide identities during interviews. There's lack of legal protection for the queer community. Like there's no explicit workplace laws, protection under Indian law, which is huge.
I would correct.
Oh, it's
so
changed.
I would say that in pockets it is there. So say for example, one thing is about, we mentioned about hiring, right? So the thing is that, as I told you, hiring is not the only thing, and it's not about a paycheck. for a queer person, it's really not about the paycheck. It is about the dignity, the stability that one gets from employment. And that's why DEI in for a queer space is more important, because as soon as you give somebody employment, now you're fixing a lot of things around them.
Of course.
Yeah. You can always do other socially responsible things. You can work in the space of HIV, you can work in the space, but employment as a piece now is very critical to a person. It really transforms
Makes your
lives.
life. Yeah.
It really transforms a life, and hence DEI in that for a queer space really works. The other piece that I'm trying to say is that about the legal laws and aspects. So we have the Trans Act, which was introduced in 2019, which totally speaks about discrimination for trans people and also safeguards them and also provides them with equal opportunities.
Right.
If you pick up any of our constitution, also you cannot bat an eye on it. Article 14 gives you the thing to express yourself, to work anywhere. If there is discrimination happening for your identity, you can still go to court. The point is that court becomes a hassle.
Of course.
But I'm saying legally you are still bounded. Yeah, nobody can really question.
Protected in some way. Okay, that's good to know. Then, of course, there's a need for gender inclusive neutral policies like washrooms, pronoun recognition, domestic partner benefits, all that, which our community needs. Also, workplace cultures are not psychologically safe always, right? Yeah. So, one little statistic is that over 40% of queer employees in India remain closeted at work because of fear of discrimination, and over 42% have experienced non-inclusive behaviors at the workplace. I think 42% is a low number, but maybe since my time the number has gotten lowered, which is good. So again, you touched on this, you preempted this. I've read that inclusive hiring helps a company grow in many ways. And I think we need to flesh this out, even though it's all very obvious to you, because hopefully companies will start picking up on why it is important, right? So, firstly, again, big shout out to Parmesh and Queeristan, because that really informed me in terms of all these kind of areas. But it's the ethical thing to do in terms of human rights. It helps earn the organization money, which you need to tell us how. It makes it innovative. It helps attract and retain employees, obviously. It improves your PR, I guess that's a benefit on the side. And it helps attract millennial mindsets, right? Okay, so can we break this down? How is it profitable for the company to have queers
I'll
jumping
explain.
around?
Okay, just because we're speaking about queer, because of the queer podcast, we'll
Branding.
and we'll speak about just the community. So inclusion of queer folks helps in two particular ways. Okay, one is when you can really build products for the queer folks if you understand them better. One is that, and one is that understanding, and also sell it to them in the right manner, that they with the right sensitivity. Like if you are using the wrong terminology, then selling them those products also can become a problem. This is where I'll give you an example of Godrej Properties. Okay, so in Godrej Properties we have 160 queer folks. They're across functions, right? Sales, customer centricity, operations, everything. Operations for us is actually civil engineering, mechanical engineering, where they're actually constructing the building.
Wow.
We have trans women who are civil engineers who actually joined us as interns in the Pride internship, converted to become full-time. They're really thriving at the workplace. Sorry, I'm just speaking because I really felt that civil engineering as a space I'll never find people,
Yeah.
I was like, how will I
Especially
find
the trans community. Yeah.
But then I'm so happy that people are there and that they're thriving. Coming to the piece of it, right? So we have people in sales. Now they are able to speak to queer folks outside and look at the community. Okay, so you look at, sadly, no marriage equality, but you have double income, no kids.
Correct.
People have the money to spend further,
and
right?
the purchasing power of the queer community
really
is in some cases a lot more than
because of not being in the basic familial structures,
Correct.
right? And that automatically gives the purchasing power to the queer professionals or queer individuals, which you can ideally go and market to them your products, bring them into the space. If the product really matters, it is actually good for them. We have actually sold homes to queer folks, and some of them, their first homes along with their partners, some individual folks.
Wow.
I think that is, if you're not inclusive of this, we wouldn't be able to sell, and if you don't sell, then you won't make more money. Because like Parmesh is obviously a customer, but everybody's not as rich as Parmesh also. But but I think the point is that there are many more folks. We need to just identify them and bring them. And I think the point that you mentioned about 40% being closeted, it is very important for the sensitivity to seek in into these selling places so that they can bring in and speak to them, because nobody's going to tell, hey, I'm queer, I want to buy a house, hey, I'm queer, I want to do this. It has to come in into the flow of things, of understanding in regular pieces, and then talk to them in that language.
Right.
It is like, say, for example, if there's a person with a Marathi speaking person, they speak to another person in Marathi, automatically the language comes,
Yes.
right? There's a lot of other languages, when I'm saying language, is meaning the body language,
Correct.
the spoken language,
Correct.
which really comes into
Make
play.
a person
Yeah.
comfortable or not. Yeah, cool. So in 2009, data estimated that India's queer population is around 6%. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we just do the math, 6% of the GDP is under $200 billion. Okay. Which is an estimated income from India's 45 million queer adults. And these are conservative estimates, right? So this kind of data is obviously supported by a lot of the top consulting groups like Kinsey, BCG, Deloitte. They all reveal that the profitability of a company that supports inclusivity and diversity, they have huge figurative differences between those that are non-inclusive. You obviously agree with
Of
that.
course. Yeah. There is no question about it.
It still makes me very excited.
There are just a lot of reports that you will see that. I'll give you an example. So there are multiple other factors also that will come into play. GPL started its journey of around being inclusive in the last, means increasing our representation. We have always been inclusive, but increasing representation in the last 2 years. I'll give you a mathematical calculation to it. And they're a publicly listed company. You can see this out. I think 2021 to 2022, we were like 7,400 crore booking value. That went up to 12,500 crore booking value. The next year, it was 22,500 crore.
How many
And now
zeros?
I'm very bad in maths. I'm
Yeah, me
dyslexic
too.
and dyscalculic. But yeah. But I think the flow is that as we have been growing, and there are many other factors as well. But this is definitely a push as well, right? In the right light.
Your company needs a queer person. Okay.
Definitely.
So also inclusive hiring is supposed to promote innovation. Now that again is a little bit of a, like, you think innovation, like what are the queers bringing to the table? How does that help innovation?
As I told you, it can become a little jargonistic, these things. I just feel that if we have all the voices on the table, and also the opportunity for dissent in a conversation, then it's healthy conversation happening, and you're able to bring up a better product or a better solution for your customers.
Right.
In that sense, it's just the whole thing of everybody coming together and bringing different views onto the table.
Right.
If there's only one or two views, let me move away from the Kerala. Move away from the queer piece. Let me give you an example. If there are, say, 5 Maharashtrians sitting, will they be able to make a payasam for Keralites? No. They'll make a vada pav, right? Maximum. Because that's how the structure is. But if you have people on the board who are also Malayali, then you will be able to bring something, or maybe you'll be able to do a better fusion of stuff as well. Right? But the whole logic is you need to understand that if it's us only speaking, or there's a particular sect of cohort speaking, they're not going to be able to do stuff,
Wow, that's cool. That's a nice way of looking at it. Yeah. Okay, so that's it. Basically, the more point of views you get, the more ideas you get, the more representation you get different perspectives, you get different. So it's, for example, like you'd think like a stockbroking company is like very cis male, patriarchal way of thinking. You're right. You throw in some
ChatGPT, what a broker thing is. They'll only see men sitting on computers. That's all that's going to come, because that's what is also being fed in, right? Garbage in, garbage out. That's what is going to happen.
Which is why your queer civil engineer thing is exciting, because it's a whole new visual.
Nobody has seen it.
Nobody's seen it, right? So also they do say that queer individuals are 7 times more likely to innovate in a workplace that promotes equality, because you start bringing your
bring a whole self
in.
to work. If I'm coming to work and I'm always going to be like holding myself back, then obviously I'm not going to put my total 100% at the place.
Correct.
The moment you have the voices and you have the inclusive culture around it, that's when everybody will feel that, oh, my voice is even heard.
And actually now they are seeing that, even I'm talking about media because that's the space that I inhabit. It's kind of interesting because when you work with young people, they're like, but why he? Why does he have to be a he? And it really makes you stop and think, why does the engineer have to be a he in an advertisement, for example, in a commercial? Why can't you have a woman, or why can't you have a queer person, like a trans person or whatever? So that's kind of cool. And of course there's a chain reaction, because then the straight allies are attracted to companies that promote diversity. Then they are more likely to bring in more numbers and stuff like that. Foreign direct investment is attracted to companies that have inclusivity. And today, millennials are 75%. They are poised to be 75% of the global workforce by in this year. And for them, clearly, it's been seen in studies that the personal is political. So if their choices align with their beliefs, then it just is a win-win situation.
For millennial Gen Zs, I'm not sure about Gen Alpha yet. I think they still need to get into the workforce. But both of these at least are very clear that if it doesn't align with my value system, then I will not want to work in an organization.
That's amazing.
That's the whole structure, which is so great, because then they're like, oh, these people are being excluded, it matters to me, and hence I'm not going to work here.
No, I'm thinking when I was in my 20s, there were no options like that. Everything was homophobic. So whether you went into advertising or you went into engineering, it was homophobic. So you didn't even think, oh no, I won't go here because it's homophobic.
But it's sad, right? There
were no options. Really. So, could you, I think you've addressed this next thing that I had, was that your work at Godrej, and like you said, you've helped create an environment where 160, that's like half of Grindr sitting in Godrej.
But that does become a problem,
there's like office romances.
So I'll give you, I'm sorry, you just brought up the topic of Grindr, so I'll bring this topic up. So the people in Godrej and the people who are out about it, the community, is not the only people out there who are also queer. Let's be honest. So my 160 folks, if you said that 6% is the thing, actually I would say it's around 10% as the stability way of it. If 160 folks are out and proud about their identity, there are other folks who are still closeted, and they can be closeted because it's their wish, or it's their choice about it. But they would be going on a Grindr, they would be on a Planet Romeo, they would be on other things, and they would intersect, and they would meet these same folks. And I come to know from being an HR, and we have to handle these situations well, right? Because that outing shouldn't happen. And how do you really look at how this culture or the safe space is hanging for people who don't want to be out? People who are out, or people who are thinking about it.
Yeah, because you have to respect somebody who doesn't want to be out also.
Yeah. But
that's cool.
Grinders are this hit my
What are the actual steps that can be taken? I'm sure there are many to implement DEI factors.
For queer folks?
Yeah. Like on ground, you tell me your reality as a person who doesn't fit in a gender binary, right? On ground reality, what are the things that make you feel comfortable working at the organization you do, and safe and secure, and make you want to be productive?
So there's a framework that I work under. One is called recruit, second is include, and third is develop. And
recruit, include, and develop.
And there's one more, which is lead. Lead is where you see all your leaders as in the top management, people who are hiring, are they aligned to the concept so that they are the ones driving it downwards, right? Sensitize your teams that somebody who is trans, who's going to come from this background, somebody who is queer is going to come from this background. You kind of sensitize those people. There's a lot of work that happens before and after in this piece. One is recruitment, second is include. That is, once you've brought them in, now how do you see that they are actually feeling included in the space, thriving in the space? Are they really feeling? That's why you bring in same-sex partner benefits. You make the benefits or the start line again same for every individual. You bring in gender-neutral washrooms as a infrastructural piece. You actually look at whether they are all inclusive or not, as in, are they PWD compliant, considering that you will have intersectionality as well. So you can have obviously people who are queer and people who are disabled, right? It's not two different Venn diagrams. They are surely
we've done an episode with the amazing Nu, which was the intersection of queerness with disability,
which is very important. So when you're looking at all of these spaces, as I told you, you really have to look at spaces and who owns these spaces, who are part of this space, and how that space evolves over a period of time, right? And in that you will bring in multiple aspects. You'll bring in policies, you'll bring in intervention, you'll do some level of sensitization. If I have to really put it, inclusion is like biryani, धीमी आंच पे तुमको पकाना पड़ेगा उसको. If you really think that it's like a quick service restaurant that सब ऐसा ऐसा करके everything is going to be fixed, it's not.
नहीं होने वाला है.
It's literally not. It really has to be cooked over a period of time, given that thing, because there's a lot of unlearning that individuals have to do. See, as I told you, people are not really bad, right? They just don't know it. They've been conditioned to believe this is how it is.
True.
And that unlearning is going to take some time. Then relearning is again going to take some more
Correct.
time. And I think that's the whole piece of DEI. That's the work that I have done. And lastly, and which is develop, that is once you brought people in, are they going to be sitting only at those roles or at that level, or are they going to grow in the organization? You know, are they going to actually have some roles which is in the leadership point of view? If having only queer folks at the entry level,
Interns,
then, yeah, that's not how inclusion
it
will
works.
work.
Yeah. I think it's so hard for the cishet community sometimes to understand these things,
Yeah.
because just the very concept that, but why? But what does
Yeah.
that mean? Like, how can you not be
There was-
comfortable in your own body? Like, how is it? And I can understand it because even I had struggled with
There was
it.
this one sensitization session I was doing, and this one person just couldn't understand why was there a need for people to come out, because the person they never understood coming out as a concept, right? For them, they were just there.
Yeah.
So they were like, "अरे, but तुमको क्यों आना है बाहर? मतलब क्या?"
Literally, they said,
मतलब
"क्यों आना है बाहर?"
Literally, yeah. Because for them, they were like, "Oh, you can just be yourself. You know, why do you need?
Why do you have to announce
Why
it?
do you have to announce it?" Because for them, they do not understand the concept of coming out because they've never been in the closet.
Yeah.
They cannot ever experience it. They're like,
Yeah.
हाँ ठीक है, मतलब बोल क्यों रहे हैं?
हाँ, बोलने
in
की
that-
क्या
Yeah.
नहीं, and that's a very common thing in the older generation. कि what's the need for coming out
Yeah.
and making a big deal? Come on, I mean, you're out, whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I understand. It is important to be personalist, political, वगैरह वगैरह
Yeah.
वगैरह.
Cancel culture is what is taking the precedence. You know,
Yeah.
you really cannot. If somebody gets, if like I'll put it in why cancel culture is so wrong. So my pronouns, my way. If I am speaking and I say somebody screws up my pronouns, I should get upset. Somebody else gets upset about it is a problem. And then the whole conversation went about pronouns, about why it was wrong. I said, let me at least get offended on my
Yeah.
own pronouns being wrong. Right?
Really?
The whole problem with cancel culture is this, that nobody is allowed to evolve. Some people will make mistakes, they will learn, and then they will this. But if the first action is going to be attack, then the action for the other person is going to be defense.
How does DEI work in this language space? Like, do you struggle? Do you find struggle with that? Because again,
Of course.
you're addressing like a multitude of.
You really have to speak to the masses, right, when you're doing DEI, and especially when you're doing sensitization. I'll give you an example. So we started down south in Bangalore. When we started making people sit down, we actually made people sit down in our site offices. We spoke about sex, we spoke about gender, we spoke about sexual orientation, we spoke what is microaggressions. For them to understand this concept, a lot of has gone through storytelling, right?
Correct.
Like I cannot
Yes,
tell them,
yes.
hey, this is microaggression, and understand it. Now, as I went upwards towards north, the request for Hindi or regional languages became a lot more thing.
So it was more English in the south, or easier English.
I would say
yeah,
that
it
was slightly more easier.
Correct.
But say, for example, if I'm speaking to support staff, I cannot speak English there again. Then somebody I need who is a vernacular specialist who can speak in Kannada, who can speak in this. So those places. But I think the requirement for Hindi automatically went up when we went a little up. And what was the problem out here is because the language itself hasn't evolved, unfortunately, or regional languages in general, because India has kept sex out of the conversation for so long that the word doesn't exist in
Wow.
regular conversation, right?
Absolutely.
Like say, for example, I won't say, hey, sambhog karte hain, right? It's very wrong in regular conversation, though it is the word in Sanskrit, or the other word is an abuse. Right? So when I'm having a conversation around it, it's either an abuse or it's either
Give me example.
I can't give an
You
abuse
can-
of.
No, you can. There are much worse things going on in podcasts in our country.
I would skip an abuse, but it's just problematic, right? I don't have a word for it. And then when I have to really have this conversation around it, I can't say samlangik.
Yeah.
Again, nobody knows samlangik. You
Yeah.
know, if I have to really go downwards. So you have to really break it down, saying that okay, the person who's male identifying, वो
पुरुष।
ये कपड़े पहनते हैं और ऐसे behave करते हैं, then you have to really do it. And I required somebody who had Hindi strength
Good.
over me,
हाँ,
right? Because
हाँ.
my Hindi is also very not so great. I left it in 8th standard. Whatever I've learned is very Bombay, and it becomes very RLI, Jarlai, which
No,
is
it's
problematic.
hard because
Yeah.
even when I have to speak in Hindi about like sexuality,
Yeah.
aside from samlangik,
Yeah.
I don't know anything
Yeah.
else to say.
True. And the thing is,
No,
that
then the rest of it is all abusive, gandu,
it's
fandu.
it's and it becomes really problematic when you have this as a concern, right? This was just two examples I put it. Now go down to even Telugu, or you go down, you'll find the same difficulty, because just the conversation hasn't happened around it. And because we have lack of words, we go towards English, because English as a language is continuously evolving, and as language evolves, people's identities will be able to be coming into it. Like, I still feel a lot of people's identities do not have the word, or the experience doesn't have the word for it,
Correct.
Yeah, and I think that word needs to be identified, which might come into flow later on. But yeah, it becomes a big concern, yeah, when you're having conversation.
Yeah.
Communication is key at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. How do you impart knowledge, or how do you okay, so the thing I was talking about was that there's this rainbow washing that happens just before, during Pride Month, which corporations do, and then we see these temporary rainbows everywhere, and then suddenly gayab, they're gone. So it's very annoying. What's your take on this? Like, how does one overcome this? Because I think the queers are also not also savvy about it.
Yeah.
Like, suddenly you have come out with one LGBT friendly commercial or piece of communication or whatever, and then there's not a tune from you for the rest of the year. So
I think, but people internally know that this is rainbow washing, right? When they see some people not doing it consistently during the year and coming out once, I think it's very clear from, if I have to put my own organization in play, we don't do only Women's Day on March 8th. Okay?
Yeah.
That day is a dreaded day now, I feel. Everybody wants to just, and they will give cakes or pastries, and then they will give you free massages or spa things, which which really brings down the discussion of women inclusion in workspaces or in society down to a spa.
Yeah, it's regressive, actually.
Yeah, I think Women's Day, days, all the days of significance, which maybe Pride Month, you have Transgender Awareness Day, they were done so that we can have a conversation around it and not really do a party around it.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's become party, and the discussion is on the back end of it. I think we really need to bring that into place, and do it consistently, and don't do it only one day.
Consistency. And now, thanks to a certain new president, Pride Month has been taken out of the calendar.
Out of the Google calendar.
But
not of the calendar. Only Google calendar.
calendar.
There are many other calendars. There are open source calendars, and the day will still exist, right? Yeah. And you don't need to be divided, concealed by a month. Yeah. Everything, we are queer all year.
Yeah, that's true. All the time, queerness. So apparently, what needs to be done, from what I've read, is that you encourage organizations to go beyond Pride Month tokenistic gestures. Employees can advocate for DEI by supporting employee resource groups that can be created, and of course the importance of allyship in leadership. So come on, straights, show your damn support. And talking about this, how do you think the straight community, both allies, how do you think they can support initiatives like the ones, for example, that you're leading?
I'll give you a 3-point thing that a person needs to do to be an ally. Okay, you need to educate yourself. One is maybe read around, understand what a queer person's identity is, what do they go through. Maybe you can listen to our speech or our this podcast for a learning point of view itself.
This amazing podcast.
Yes, amazing podcast, which will, I hope we don't bore you, and we're going to get some learning from it. One is educate yourself. Second is, they need to be out of the closet more than the queer person. Okay, because if you are, I'm saying that if you are somebody who supports, wear it on your sleeve. Don't be like, tu mera dost hai par main kisko batayega nahi. That shouldn't happen. You should be open about your friendship. You should be open about that I'm supportive. That's when other queer folks also get the the confidence that, I can be out here, because this space is inclusive.
Shameful.
If you are going to be quiet around and you'll be like, I want to support, but I don't think this looks cool. That's not allyship. That's literally not allyship. You need to be out, and you need to be open about your support to policies, to communities, to etc. And last is, you need to speak up. When you see something happening, if whether it's a small little joke that happens in the corner of an office, you need to raise your voice up, because if you do not do it, the other person who the joke is being hit at now, they don't have the courage to do that. Cool. Some of them might hit back, but you have the power to raise your voice. Use it.
Call it out.
That's an ally. Educate yourself, speak up, be visible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Suno. Okay. Okay. Now, if you could go back and tell your younger self something, this is a bit RuPaulish, but
Yeah,
what
I
would
know.
it be? Yeah.
I think that you will find your identity in time. That's the statement I'd like to tell them. Don't rush into things. मतलब you feel that अभी ये ऐसा क्यों नहीं है, but I think things will fall into place in the larger length of time. Don't need to rush.
So be a little more organic
Yeah,
about what's
be a little
happening,
more.
about processing.
Don't need to run behind, oh, this is not me, this
I'm
is
this,
not.
I'm that.
Yeah, I'm that. I think the identity really falls into place over a period of time.
Yeah.
Just have patience is my concept.
And I think, again, we were talking about Harish Iyer,
Yeah.
a big activist in our community
who's now expressing themselves
who's now
more
expressing
feminine,
themselves at feminine
Yeah.
presenting. And I've known Harish, well, at a distance, and
Yeah.
also done a little bit of work with Harish, but there was never any sign of the
Correct.
feminine presenting earlier.
Maybe there was always internally. We don't know. I just can't say. Yeah.
Same thing with Sushant Rani
Yeah.
Kohinoor, who's
Yeah.
now a big leading
Beautiful.
sort of role model for the trans
Of course.
community. When I worked with him in those days in 2014, literally 11 years ago,
Yeah.
cute little gay boy.
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no trace of they is
Gorgeous.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
gorgeous. Okay, amazing stuff, Zoya. Thank you so much. It's been so interesting and learning, which I knew it would be, to be able to chat to you. Many shokriyas for coming in, for sharing your journey. And we all wish you so much success with what you're doing, because you're actually impacting ground reality. You're actually transforming the queer community, people's lives on an actual basis, on a tangible basis. So lots of love and rainbow kisses to
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, Ashish.
And is there anything you'd like to close with? Anything that you'd like to say from a DEI perspective or anything?
I firstly would like to thank you at the first place. I think we met many months ago, and then
Yes.
you're calling me on this.
Yeah,
It's
but the
been-
moment I met you at that fair, I
Yeah.
knew that I wanted to have you
That's so
as an
sweet of you.
episode. Yeah.
And I think I'll just speak to the people and the audience. I think there are two people, okay, I'd like to speak to. One is the corporates. I think there's a lot that you can still do to be further inclusive and make your spaces as welcoming and profitable as well in that space. And the other is that the other folks who are queer, and you need to find your footing. Don't worry about how the career will flow. Concentrate on your work, concentrate. It's an interesting, inclusive space, and I think you will surely grow in that space. Hold your queer self, but also concentrate on your skills and what you really bring to the table. Yeah, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you again.
Thank you.